Hello and welcome to this session on converting thesis into journal article. We will be giving you tips and guidelines on how you can potentially publish your own dissertation into an article. The purpose of this session is to give students who are interested to convert their dissertation or project work into a publishable peer-reviewed scholarly article guidance. So we will touch on the differences between a thesis and a journal article, how to successfully write and edit the writing that you already have in the form of your dissertation, how to select an appropriate journal, and how to respect submission guidelines, among other tips we are going to cover. It may not necessarily be that challenging to convert your final work project into an article. It is important to realize that there are different audiences for your academic work and for your journal article. For dissertations, you would be mindful to meet the marking criteria, whereas an article is meant to be a scholarly work which contributes to advancing knowledge in the realm of academia. So there are distinct differences between thesis and article. For thesis, for a dissertation, you will be concerned to making sure that you have met, as I said, the academic requirements, whereas for an article, this will be published in a journal and should meet the journalistic standards. Your dissertation is marked by a qualified staff member of the university, and for an article, this is reviewed by panel members who are well versed with the scholarity of your topics. Your dissertation will normally have chapters, articles will have sections instead. In terms of word limits, around 5,000, but for an article, it will be around 5,000 only, and it varies depending on the journal. So the article in essence is actually more concise. The literature review, as well as the article, as well as the methodology section, is more succinct. The findings that you present would be more selective in the article compared to the dissertation. So overall, your article is a very structured work in terms of being very focused, objective, relevant, and concise. Let's get started with the first tip, which is about identifying the appropriate target journal. You need to understand the contribution of your topic to sift through the journals that would correspond to your own area. You would want to read the aims and scope of the different journals that could be relevant to your topic. You would consider what are the characteristics the journal require, what referencing is applied, what is the specific structure required, and here we have a typical structure on the screen. You will also check the website of Jane. This is a tip. Jane, Jane in caps, is a website whereby you can insert your abstract, and this will give suggestions of some corresponding journals. You're advised to consider how the journal reviews articles. This will further help you to craft your writing in the particular frame, style, requirements of that journal. You will ensure if the journal has any specific guidelines in prescribed structure required. If this is the case, normally this is the case with standardized journal. It gives you specific guidelines to be respected. So this is the first step. This is how you may get started. You get started by finding a target journal, finding one journal that would be relevant to your topic and into which you can publish your own article. With the second tip, you have the advice of shortening the length of your thesis. A dissertation will normally have lengthy detailed description of the research approach. The methodology is very well explained. Results discussion sessions are quite elaborate to purposefully present the deep theoretical understanding you have for your research. However, for articles, the writings are expected to be focused, often following a specific format, a very concise literature review, a controlled methodology section, a very succinct discussion. Therefore, it is required to reduce the wordings. And it could be, for example, reducing a dissertation of about 20,000 words to 3,000 to 6,000 words when you convert it into an article. Of course, as I said earlier, it will depend on the journal. It is important to understand that it is not just a matter of trimming down words, but it requires that you select and repurpose the key elements of the paper. So you would want to preserve the essence of the study by actually leaving out all elaborate details. The third tip is to reformat the introduction as an abstract. For dissertation, the abstract section is normally much longer than for a journal, which will range between 100 to 250 words. Again, of course, depending on the requirement of the journal you select. Some journal articles require structured abstracts. The abstract would need to be written in a particular format, so you would ensure regarding this. In fact, you are advised to read the abstract of some previously published articles in that journal that you select. This will give you an idea of how the abstract is written, the writing style that is applied. Is there any particular format that you can yourself detect by actually reading different articles? So you would want to understand how you are supposed to write the abstract for the article, and by studying some abstracts from that particular journal you have selected, it will enable you to understand the approach you need to take into converting the introduction you have for your dissertation into an abstract. The next tip is about modifying the introduction. For the article, you would make the introduction concise. The word concise, you'll be hearing it a number of times as we go along dissecting how you're meant to write the different sections. For the introduction, this has to be straight to the point. If your dissertation includes more than one research question, you need to consider addressing one, particularly when publishing it for an article. This will enable the writing to be more focused. Your research question will need to be closely linked to the theme area covered by the target journal. So if you have more than one question being addressed by your dissertation, you need to select which one you want to address for a particular journal, and the others as well could be addressed as another topic for another journal, or even the same journal in another article. The tip number 5 is about tightening the methods section. This is another section we're going to talk about, and again we put emphasis on how this section as well has to be very concise. Journal articles require a controlled presentation of the methods section. You should limit yourself to describing the methodology that was used. A comprehensive approach of the research was, you would not be actually involving into giving elaborate details as to how you approach the research question. You would be giving the required details about your methodology. You, in fact, may want to consult the methodology section of some articles from your target journal to understand the writing format and particularities for writing this section. Let's now talk about the main findings in results. For this section, normally in a dissertation, each and every result is reported in a detailed manner, whereas in an article, you would report only the main findings. The findings should be directly relevant to the research question, well-founded. If you have secondary findings, these could be presented in the supplementary section if the journal allows that. We will now talk about the discussion section. And the tip is to ensure the discussion is clear and concise. The discussion in an article will be focused, that is, deriving from the results and meaningful to the research question. You would discuss how the findings situate themselves around the presented literature. In this section, you are encouraged to strike a balance in supporting your findings with literature that concurs with these as well as contrasting ones. You would engage in critical writing. You want to make sure that your explanation is not an overstatement of the effectiveness of your findings when these would be applied concretely. You would be taking a hedging approach when driving the discussion. You would consider covering any limitations to the research as well. So for the discussion section, you need to adopt an objective approach. Number 8 is about limiting the number of references. Typically, dissertations have very exhaustive list of citations and references, whereas for an article, you would be mindful to limit the references to those which are very relevant and recent ones. In fact, you are advised to check any guidelines provided by the journal pertaining to references. Some would have limits, imposed on the number of references you can give. You want to be very much conscious about the formatting required. You would want to be flawless with referencing, as your work will be peer reviewed and you want to really make a good impression right from the beginning of your first submission to the panel. So we have covered the tips. Now we want to understand the questions you need to ask yourself before you submit your work in terms of authorship, copyright, and publishing model. For authorship, you have to decide right from the start who would be listed as authors if there is more than one individual working on the paper. Or it could be that you have some individuals who have contributed for some of the sections of the work. So you have to decide who takes the ownership, the authorship of the work. You would want to make sure that all authors meet the ethical requirements, if any, set by the target journal, as well as all individuals work with integrity throughout the process of writing, submitting, everything. Concerning the copyright, you would decide who holds the copyright to the dissertation. Is it the author? Is it the institution, or both? What about aspects of the work like texts used, graphics used, etc.? Publishers will expect that you sign a copyright form, therefore, you must know the rights you have. You are advised to talk to the journal you select to investigate how these matter. These matters are handled by their publishing policies. Let's talk about publishing models for some minutes. This is important knowledge when you are choosing your journal. We have traditional publishing, which is about authors submitting their work, which goes to the peer review process, and if all is in order, this gets published into a subscription based journal free of charge. In this case, the cost of the publishing process is normally levied into the subscription cost, and the authors themselves do not pay anything. There is also the open access publishing, whereby the author or an institution or a funding agency will pay a publication fee and they would retain the copyright. This means that the journal will remain free, available to readers online. We also have subscription based journals, which would at a stage give you the option of whether you want the journal to be open access, whereby this would involve you paying a fee and retaining the copyright, or whether the journal retains the copyright and you're not required to pay any fee. So these are things you would want to understand right from the beginning as soon as you select your journal. Let's end this session with some golden rules. So to conclude, we will go through some key reminders. You need to remember that an article is written for a different audience. Having this in mind will shape much of your work, from the presentation to the structure to the writing style, to meet the journal requirements. An important tip mentioned earlier is to review, study, in fact, the articles already published in the journal you select. This will help you to understand the expectations of your own writing. You would want to get advice from experienced authors, and the whole purpose of this session is to encourage you to turn your dissertation into articles with the assistance of experienced academics who are working under the research committee of our university. In fact, you would want assistance in regards to reviewing your work. Through this process, you would receive useful feedback, and again, on this level, the research committee is available to provide support. You will be informed of the arrangements the committee puts in place in regards to the support in the near future. With your work, you want to be able to justify why your dissertation is worth publishing. Even if this is an area which is existing in the literature, you want to understand the uniqueness of your work for this to transpire confidence as you engage into this very resourceful experience. You would want to establish a writing style which is free of any bias. That is, it has to be objective and focused. I want to end by saying it is a very worthwhile experience if you decide to actually work on turning your dissertation into an article. So we are at the end of this session, and I hope you have now an idea of how one can actually potentially turn their thesis, their dissertation into an article. And it is not that challenging given the fact that you have already invested your time, energy, knowledge, research into the dissertation, and it is normally to actually make it into an article. It now just requires some very mindful crafting. Therefore, it is not that challenging, and as I mentioned, you will have the support of staff members of our university to guide you should you be interested. So, all the best for this project if you intend to engage in it. Thank you for your attention.